You're listening to Beyond Technique, the podcast that empowers photographers to bring their businesses to the next level. Hello and welcome to Beyond Technique, brought to you by Platypod, Photofocus, and Cohen University. This is Shamir Young, and I am joined by my fellow co-host, Skip Cohen. Skip, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. It's one of those outrageously gorgeous days in Florida where humidity is not making us crazy yet.
Nice.
And it's great that things are starting to get open again. And the only thing everybody's worried about lately seems to be a little bit of red tide off the coast. So hopefully if the wind keeps blowing in the direction it is, it'll stay out to sea.
Awesome.
And yeah, and this is fun. We've got a great show today. In fact, Shamira, you know that before every podcast, I always write out an introduction of our guests, so
Yes.
I try not to miss anything. But I got to tell you, I've been hanging out with today's guests for so long that there isn't enough time for me to write everything about their contribution to the industry and all the things we've done together. We've got a husband and wife team in the house today with Bobbi Lane and Varis. Individually and as a couple, they are nonstop energy and kind of proof that hyperactive kids can meet each other, get married, have a happy life, grow up and have jobs. Now, Bobbi's best known as the queen of lighting education, and if that's what she is, then Lee's the emperor of digital workflow and Photoshop and technology. Put the two of them together with Bobbi and Lee's photo adventures, and you've got some of the most memorable and dynamic photography trips in the industry. They're authors, educators, artists, and they are two people who so many of us consider good friends. So we're going to talk a little bit about the pandemic today, the importance of education, the challenges of working with a family member, and God only knows what else is going to come up along the way. So, Bobbi and Lee, this is going to be the cue for your lips to move. Welcome to Beyond Technique.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Skip. Thank you, Chamira. Thank you both so much for having us. You know, we always love to, anything that we can do with the two of you is always a joy.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for having us.
Well, it's so great to have you both, and I just wish the listeners could hear our pre-interview chat, because I feel like we've kind of been having a party for the last half hour already. This is going to be a fun one.
There were some pretty funny things that definitely a lot of people would feel were TMI.
Oh, love it. Well, let's kick it off with our favorite first question, just so that any of our listeners who may not know about you, we want them to get to know you better. So could you both kind of share with us your background and how you got started in the photography industry and how you ended up doing what you're doing today?
Okay, well, Bobbi, you should go first.
Okay, I'm first off, I want to correct you, Skip. I'm the mistress of light.
Ooh.
Queen of all things lighting is pretty cool too. I like that, but it's mistress of light is my very funny nickname.
Mistress, queen, empress. I was going to do empress and emperor.
Empress sounds pretty good. I like that too.
It's just so hard working with, your egos, you guys.
Okay, so that's it. I'm done. I'm from the Boston area originally, and I went to New England School of Photography, and I was really interested in product photography. That's how I started. Large format product photography in the studio, total, attention to detail, picky, crazy, control freak kind of stuff. And that's what really got me into lighting, for one thing. But I learned from Bill Sumner. He was the photographer that I worked with, a fantastic human being, incredibly talented and creative photographer. So he's the one that really got me seeing the light. And after that, I just kept on going. I transitioned from shooting product to people slowly over time. It wasn't really a plan. I did move to Los Angeles, and I spent 25 years in LA at a studio in LA and did a lot of different kind of work, from environmental portraits. And I didn't really ever do any celebrity things like that. I did more advertising, corporate, and some editorial. But I started teaching. I always loved teaching, and I was teaching through UCLA Extension at my studio. I was teaching lighting classes. This is back in the late 80s, and then teaching my own classes. And since then, I've taught at Santa Fe in Maine and the Julia Dean Workshop, which is now Los Angeles Center of Photography and International Center of Photography in New York, as well as teaching my own classes and workshops, not just in the United States, but worldwide. And with my fabulous partner and husband and love of my life, Lee Varis, we also do photo travel tours. So we'll tell you about that later. But, now I'm primarily known for photographing people. And I love people, I love traveling, I love light, I love putting all of that together, and I love making photographs of places or people or things that other people don't get to see or experience, so that I can actually bring some more knowledge and understanding of the human condition worldwide. And I don't mean to make that sound heavy, because I'm not like a documentary photographer. But, it really does mean a lot to me that I have the ability to do all this and then come back and show it to other people.
Right. So my turn, huh? Okay. Well, I went to school, grew up in Los Angeles, and eventually started working in Hollywood. I was doing movie posters, primarily body double. So there's a whole thing with that, where from the neck down on a movie poster is typically not the actor you think it is. It's somebody else who's been hired to be the body double for the actor. And this is, I think, probably like 95% of movie posters are done this way, because by the time the ad agency has started working on the concept, the actors are already on to the next movie, or they're just not available for photo shoots. So very often you have to photograph bodies doing things and stick heads on them.
Interesting.
And this eventually, I was sort of an early adopter of all kinds of technology. I was like the first kid on the block with a fax machine, the first kid on the block with a pager, And I ran my business on a computer, but I also started doing imaging very early. So my first copy of Photoshop was actually Barney Scan, came with a scanner. It wasn't even called Photoshop. So I've had Photoshop since the very beginning. In fact, that's kind of how I started teaching as well, because I made the transition to digital probably before most people in Los Angeles. So I was actually teaching other photographers how to use digital, how to actually migrate from a film-based workflow to digital workflow. So, and here I am today. I'm not doing movie posters anymore, but Bobbi and I travel the world. We teach workshops all over and lead photo tours. And
may I just say that he wrote the best-selling book, Skin, which is how to...
the complete guide to lighting, photographing, and retouching faces and bodies.
So he's the I'm the mistress of light, and he's the sultan of skin.
There we go.
Love it.
There we go. You know what? It almost sounds like we're naming a car at a NASCAR rally. Coming around the bend is the Sultan of Skin. It's funny, Bobbi. You said you really didn't get into celebrities that much, and half our audience is going to have to go look it up. But if I remember right, there's a story about George Harrell using your studio for a stretch.
Oh, yes. For 12 years, George shot in my studio. He rented my studio. This is back in the days when there wasn't rental studios didn't exist. Either you had one or you didn't. And we were in this very old building that used to be the dressing rooms for
MGM?
No, it wasn't MGM. It was right across the street. Your studio was around the corner. I do have to tell you this. Lee and I had studios around the corner from each other for 8 years. Like literally, like you could see it out the door, and we never met. So
wow.
Anyway, George rented my studio, and so everything he shot from 1980 until 92, he shot in my studio. And the list of celebrities just kind of goes on and on and on. First 2 years of Herb Ritz's career, he also rented my studio. They had the same rep, and I knew the rep. So that's how that happened. So it was really an amazing experience to see how George worked. I mean, really the master portrait photographer. As well as really funny and wonderful stories about celebrities, as well as some really horrible ones.
Well, for our listeners, especially young listeners that are relatively, not necessarily young, but they're new, for listeners new to the industry, this is an outrageously small industry. We've all been to the same rubber chicken dinners together. We can all play the 3 degrees, 6 degrees, whatever it is, of Kevin Bacon game and all connect back to somebody. You could pick almost anybody in the industry and we're going to find a connection there. And remember that, because part of that network, and that's like what you're talking about now, and with Herb Ritz and with George Harrell, and you guys around the corner from each other and had never met, but I can guarantee that over a lot of those years, there are probably a whole bunch of the same friends that you shared.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So let's jump in. This is going to be a hard podcast to keep our time limited today. Just hit lightly on some of the key things that you guys found that helped you in not just surviving the pandemic, but now coming out of it and getting back to trying to build your business back up again. Because we talked a lot during this time, and there were some pretty bleak stretches there, especially like the first 6 months.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it certainly was hit hard. We came back from our Venice Carnival photo tour, and within 3 weeks, everything that we had planned for the next year and a half was gone.
Wow.
And it was, it was pretty devastating. So, and I, quite honestly, I hit the wall. I kind of shut down. I shut down on just about every level. I didn't touch the camera for well over a month. And I took my energy into cooking, but cooking really healthy, delicious, wonderful meals. Both of us have lost 12 to 14 pounds in during the pandemic, which is kind of the opposite of most people, and that's to do with my cooking. But so that all my creativity was going into that, and then I think that helped me. Just like I had to shut photography down, but I had to be creative. So in doing that, my creativity came back, and then I picked up the camera again, and I have been working on personal projects. Specifically, I've been doing stuff with flowers, which is very different from what you think of with most people shooting flowers. And I have probably now shot more for myself in the last year and a half than I have at any other time in my career. So it was kind of like taking a right turn to do something else that brought me back into it and fully into it. Like, I think that I've made some of my most favorite photographs ever in the last year. But it's all been self-directed after hitting the wall.
Yeah. Yeah, my situation, I had a kind of part-time gig producing webinars for this business management company. And what happened, we lost everything. All of our normal photo business just went out the window. And this company has an online division, and that's what I was working for, their sort of online education division, which was the kind of poor stepchild of the company. They didn't pay any attention to it because they were primarily an in-person education operation. They had facilities in New York and San Francisco and Chicago, all over the place. And when the pandemic hit, everything went online. So I suddenly had a full-time job, producing webinars for this company. And that sort of sustained me through most of this pandemic. And only recently have they've like let all their producers go. They've cut back and reorganized things. And, now I don't have that. But now we're coming out of the pandemic and we're booking workshops. And so I kind of like floated us across that cavern. And
very grateful for Lee kind of, he took one for the team in doing that. But the hard part of this, I'm going to say this and then you fill in, is that it really was it sucked his creativity. And it was because it was really all technical. And, he really was, you got a little depressed.
I did. But like anybody, it was a miserable kind of experience. But now we're out of it.
So how are you now?
Oh, not so bad. I think we both sort of bounced back, and we got new infrared camera conversions. I've just been going crazy.
Yeah, we're into the infrared right now.
With color infrared, I'm doing some very different stuff with that. So we're working on some workshops, and I'm going to do online education for this infrared post processing.
Wow, that's very, it's interesting hearing everyone's personal story going through the pandemic. And Bobbi, you mentioned your self-directed personal projects. And Lee, you mentioned how it came up where you were depressed because, you said you weren't able to be very creative with what you were doing. That leads me to my next question. I'm curious. So could you both kind of talk about the importance of fostering your creativity, personal projects, and continuing education as well? Just why is that important to us as creatives, as photographers?
Well, I mean, I think it's critical that you continue to grow, and to do that, you need to challenge yourself. You need to kind of get, it's sort of cliche, but you have to get out of your comfort zone and do something you're not used to doing, so that you can really learn something. And I think initially, holding back and being afraid and just getting wrapped up in the whole pandemic fear thing was very stifling, but gradually, we both sort of took the opportunity of the time that was given to us and started using that with self-directed projects, and I think that's it's important to force yourself, even if you don't feel creative on a given day, pick up the camera and start doing something, anything.
That's I want to jump in on that, because I think that is so important. It's sometimes it's so hard to take that first step, but when you take the first step, even if you don't feel like shooting, as Lee just said, when you start to shoot, then it opens the door, and it allows the creativity. I mean, we're all creative. We're all creative people. It's part of who we are as human beings.
Yes.
And it's kind of like in our society, it's not really disdained, but it certainly isn't honored as it is in some other places. But so, we have a tendency to say, oh, well, we can't really do that because it's not practical. Yet it is. Don't we all want to live in a creative zone all the time? I mean, you can't do it all the time, but to be in that place. So taking that step, putting one foot in front of the other. I have two favorite sayings in photography. One is everything depends upon everything, and the other one is a line from the I Ching, which is perseverance furthers. And this really relates to that. If you persevere, you will get somewhere. And so in me in doing these personal projects, I can look back and see what I was shooting a little more than a year ago to what I'm shooting now, and how much I think that I have progressed. And I'm making looking at them sometimes going, oh my God, this is so outstandingly beautiful. I'm surprising myself. But I really had to take those steps to get out of my depression and hole to make it go forward. And it wasn't easy, but it got easier. It got easier and easier. Yeah. And now I can go days. My dining room is my studio, and the dining room is no longer the dining room. So, I would get up in the morning, and before I even had coffee or anything to eat, I would start shooting, because everything was there. And I would shoot for like an hour and a half, and then I'd say, oh wow, I haven't even had a cup of coffee yet. Never mind showers. I didn't get showers until later in the day.
It's interesting because photographers, especially as educators, one of the things that everybody always stresses is the importance of building a relationship with your clients. But with special projects, the most important client in the world is you. It's yourself.
Yeah.
And that's where so many photographers just never built. They haven't built the relationship with the face in the mirror. And I think that it's so cool what you said. And by the way, in terms of favorite lines in photography, you had two big names. I'll put a smaller name out there for my favorite line, which was Dean Collins, and it was "Beauty is in the eyes of the checkbook holder."
Yes.
So
that's true.
And that's very important right now as everybody starts to get back in business. Hey, we're talking so much about special projects and all these components. I don't want to miss what programs do you guys have coming up where people can get a direct taste of what Bobbi and Lee are all about, either individually or together? What's on the horizon over the next couple months?
Well, we have our first trip since the pandemic hit will be to Iceland in September.
So yeah, the photo tours are back. We have Iceland in September and Carnival, Venice Carnival next February.
I will say though, they're booked. You know, as soon as we threw them out there, they booked up. People are so anxious to get out and traveling again. So our travel tours are booked up already. And,
right.
You know, so we're doing Iceland, and we're also doing Venice for Carnival in February. Those two are already booked up. So we don't have another travel tour
planned
scheduled
at this point.
We have plans, but they're not scheduled. So,
and we have some ideas. But we're working basically this summer. We're going to stay local, south of Boston and north of Boston. We have another place that we can work north of Boston. And as Lee was mentioning earlier, we've both had black and white IR conversion cameras for years, but Lee just got the super color, and I just got a better black and white, and we have been diving into the infrared really deeply and Lee is coming up with all kinds of cool ways of doing things. So we have a workshop that we have rescheduled now for the weekend of June 26th and 27th. We're not sure which day yet, but we'll have that soon. But we will be doing our natural light, my Portraits Unplugged. We'll be doing that. The backyard studio using a canopy and reflectors and make it look like you're in a studio, except you're outside, all natural light. Portraits with flash, dragging the shutter, going into downtown Boston in late afternoon, and doing some, balancing your portable flash with the city lights. And we've got a few other things. We've got some ideas. We don't have everything in solid schedule right now, but we will be coming up with that pretty soon.
It's moments away, really. I mean, we've gotten so much practice doing Zoom presentations. I gotta tell you,
yes,
that's about all we did during the pandemic as far as education goes. Lots and lots of Zoom presentations. So we are actively working on some online educational materials, and I certainly have a fairly large library of post-processing tutorials available
and
on
we
my
also
website.
We also just made we've just released this. We have a 2.5 hour both video and still presentation entitled Portraits, Natural and Flash, and it covers everything about how portable flashes work, manual, TTL, the attachments, all the modifiers, working with light, with natural light, working with the portable flash, posing, directing, conceptual. So it's 2.5 hours, and we are now selling that on our Bobbi and Lee's Photo Adventures website. So we're trying to do a whole bunch of other stuff that's basically that we're in charge of, because after the pandemic and all the organizations and schools that we've worked with, everybody's pulled back so much that we realize that we can't count on anybody else to be working with. So, we're better off. We know what we're doing. And we know what we want, and we know what the students want, because we've been doing this for so long. So we're going to be really trying to just come back and do pretty much all of our education is going to be done through us instead of through other people.
Oh, that's fantastic. And, I was just talking to a friend, and I was telling her, it feels weird to be making plans this summer, and yet that's what's happening all around us. It's so cool to hear how your in-person programming and traveling trips are basically filling up. And I'm not surprised that photographers are just eager and itching to do something in person. There's nothing like in-person education. And
especially for lighting, it's like it's hard to teach lighting on Zoom.
Absolutely. And hey, I'm curious. It's so fun hearing the two of you talk. Sometimes it sounds like you two are sharing the same brain, and yet other times I know you both have your particular individual strengths, which is what makes you such a dynamic duo and so great together. Are you willing to share with us, what are the challenges of working with a spouse?
I'm going to say something first, and then I'm going to let you go. I think one of the things that's really important is that you each have an office that you can close the door.
I mean,
Love it.
We get along really well.
I can tell.
That doesn't mean we don't irritate each other sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest challenge during the pandemic, especially, is that we didn't go anywhere. So we were like in each other's face like 24/7. And it's hard to it's hard to have like a professional time that doesn't segue into personal time, that doesn't become, just this mishmash of everything happening all at once. And it can be stressful. It can get tiring and stressful. But fortunately, we love each other. So.
And sometimes even more importantly, we like each other. So that's important. But it is tough since both of us were going through different things during the pandemic. Lots of times in a relationship, if one person's having a hard time, the other person is in a good place, and then they can support each other. But, we both were having a hard time. I also had some surgery last year, which I'm fine now, but it was another big major thing that happened in the middle of a pandemic.
Oh my goodness.
It was very difficult for both of us, I think, and we did really well. But there's something that we're doing now that we're that we're able to get back out into the world again and see people again. We have made a conscious decision as a couple to go out and do creative things together.
Yeah.
Such as
going on little shoots together.
Well, and we've joined the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. We spent last Wednesday in there.
Oh, so cool.
Last weekend we went up to Vermont, and on the way back we stopped in North Adams, where the Massachusetts MoCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art, which was a spectacular experience. We've joined the Heritage Garden and Museum in Sandwich, Mass, which is basically like an arboretum. We've been down there a couple of times now, which we've been doing infrared down there as well as some other things. Obviously some beautiful color. So we're specifically doing things together that are the input. We needed the input. The creativity's been going out. So you need to put something back. So for example, we got up at 4:30 this morning.
Yes. This is like little Bobbi's plan. Let's go shoot the eclipse. So we get up at 4:30. We get out there. There's clouds at the horizon, when the sun's coming up.
We're in Plymouth Harbor. We have the Plymouth Rock is right behind us.
We're out there waiting for the sun, and there's clouds up, and we're not going to get it, and it happened.
It came up, and if you go to my Facebook page, you can see the pictures.
Yeah. By the way, the images you posted were stunning. Especially the one big one that came up first.
Yeah, we had about a 70% eclipse here, which was really, really cool. So we've been trying to do things that are creative and doing creative input.
I have to tell you, one of the great joys of going out and photographing with a partner who is also a photographer is that, when we're driving down the road and one or both of us looks and goes, "Oh, look, let's stop and take a picture of that." We both hop out of the car, we both get cameras, and then we're good for an hour and a half, and nobody says, "Can we go now? I'm tired. We got to get to the next play." Nobody says that, because we're both get involved in taking pictures. So I never have to worry. Am I driving my partner crazy by insisting that I wait here for the shadow to change? Because she's doing the same thing.
That's so great.
And then the really cool thing is when you get back and you start looking at the pictures that each of us has taken in the same location, it's amazing to see how we both see things differently. And it pisses me off sometimes. Bobbi will get a shot and I'll go, "Damn it, I didn't get that. I didn't see that."
And I say the same thing. It's like, "Oh my God, look at these fantastic images. Where was that?" I'm like, "Oh, I was standing right next to you and I didn't see that."
So we have fun.
We do.
You two are adorable.
We play off.
I've got one question I want to work in here before Shamara wraps us up with our favorite last question. you've hit on some of it already in talking about how the two of you work together and have gotten through the craziness of the last year. But if you had to pick just one or two things that photographers need to do to get back to building their business, because right now, and we were talking about this before the podcast started, there are so many artists out there that are caught in the middle of analysis paralysis, and they can't figure out, oh, what do I need to do to get my business going? Because they either procrastinated or they went into that understandable depression that you guys talked about that is very real because business just disappeared, and it's like, now what? What would you say the photographers
You have some.
need to focus on right now so that tomorrow morning they're starting on the right track back?
Well, everybody is so different. It's a tough one because everybody's going to have a slightly different approach to things. I mean, I think certainly working on your branding, working on your website, getting, that's an ongoing process. You're never done with your website. So even if you don't have anything else you can do, I recommend, just working on your website, put new images up, whatever, make a change to keep it fresh. And I'm the only website I've been working on is Bobbi and Lee's Photo Adventures. My own website has fallen by the wayside.
Yeah, mine too.
But it is something that I'm not very good at, but I highly recommend that you just keep working on it.
I have something to add to that, which is I think that for a lot of people, you get so stuck in the moment, and even though the pandemic moment has been a year and a half, it still is a moment in your entire career. And, Lee and I have been through recessions, almost depressions, the changes from film to digital to all of this. And I keep hearing the naysayers. Every time something like this happens, the naysayers. And I just look at them and say, okay, I'm going to still be here. I'm still here. I'm going to keep on going. It's like, okay, so this is a problem. I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to get through it, and it's going to get better. So if you can take that attitude about that this isn't the end of everything, it's just what's happening right now, and it's going to change, and you can make the change. So if you can keep your positive attitude and, again, do that perseverance furthers, then that's going to help you so much. Don't give up. Just don't give up. Think about everything positive that is possible.
I love it. A positive attitude is so important. Yes. And, that is wonderful advice for photographers who are working to get back on track and grow their business post-pandemic. And I'm curious, for our favorite final question, we want to touch on advice you have for photographers who are just starting out right now, especially during this interesting time in history. Is there any piece of advice you might have for photographers who are just starting out and want to give it a go?
Well, I think if you're just starting off, you definitely need to do your research and look at other photographers. I mean,
yes.
look at good photographers that you want to emulate.
Yeah, keep that in the forefront so that you're putting really great imagery in front of you instead of crap imagery.
I think a lot of photographers are guilty of, I don't want to be influenced by anybody. I'm going to do my own thing, and they don't spend enough time looking at what other great photographers are doing. And besides, like preventing you from reinventing the wheel all the time, it can provide unexpected inspiration. You don't necessarily have to try to shoot just like Herb Ritz, right? Or Irving Penn, or go back even further, like George Horrell or something like that. You don't have to shoot like them to be inspired by things that they do. And also, and I'm not very good at this, Bobbi's much better at this, at knowing who the contemporary photographers, who's doing stuff now that's interesting. I think that it's also important to pay attention to the young people that are doing interesting work coming up. Anybody that's doing something interesting and new, pay attention and just try to absorb what it is that they're doing and make it your own.
I think it's also true to not just look at photographers, but to look at all artists. As just the experience that we just had, is that looking at painters and sculptors and multimedia people and all of that is all good creative inspiration. So, and I'm going to add two things to that. One of them is education, and I think that education in a group, we do private mentoring, and that's really good when you're at a certain place, but as you're getting going, education in a group by attending a class or a workshop, even if it's a Zoom, you get to see and hear what other people are doing, and you learn so much from other people. So I think that's one of the keys to education, is not just what the subject matter is or how good the teacher is, but what you're going to learn from the people in the class. So, and that's a continual thing. That should be something that people do all along. But the final thing, and Skip knows what I'm going to say, is you've got to learn good business practices.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to try to make a living in this business, you have to understand business, and on all levels of it. It's so important.
Join a photo organization, join ASMP, APA, join something that PPA, join a photo organization, because they will help teach you business practices. And photographers love to take workshops on photography, how to do the latest technique or whatever, but you really need to be working on business practices and learn how to do an invoice, learn how to do an estimate,
learn your copyright laws, learn about the licensing rights. It's really important. Learn how to market yourself and do your books, and it's like everything. It's you can't be in business without it. You're no different than somebody who makes scarves or hats. Everybody's got to do the same things.
Absolutely. Yep. This is great stuff. Wow.
Great stuff.
I want to make sure and ask, where can we find you both online to check out what you're up to?
Well, we both have our own websites, and we have a joint website. So my website's just varis.com, VARIS.com. And Bobbi,
I am, www.bobbilane.com, and that's BOBBI. There's no E. BOBBILANE.com. And then our joint website is Bobbi and Lee's Photo Adventures.
And it's all spelled out with the and spelled out, not an ampersand. Bobbi and Lee's with an S, photoadventures.com.
But there's no apostrophe after Lee. There's no apostrophe S. It's just, so it's all lowercase, Bobbi and Lee's photoadventures.com. We have a great website that Lee has done. And if you go to the home page, you'll see all the categories there. But if you scroll down to the bottom of the home page, that's where you can sign up to get our newsletter. So our newsletter both is telling you what's going on, what's upcoming, but also we're putting in photo tips and some educational material that's involved in that as well.
Wonderful.
So
we will make sure to include those 3 links in our show notes so that our listeners can definitely check you out. And
all right.
Skip, where can we find you online?
It's always the same answer. Everything I write is at skipcohenuniversity.com. I'm Skip Cohen on Facebook. I'm Skip Cohen on Twitter. And my email is skip@mei500.com. So when you've got input on any of the podcasts for Beyond Technique or other podcasts that Shamira and I do, and you've got some feedback or ideas of guests or topics, give us a shout. And then I always ask the same question every single time. Shamira, where do they find you?
Yes, folks can send me an email at shamira@photofocus.com. That is my first name, CHAMIRA @photofocus.com. We love getting questions, ideas, feedback. It shapes how we move forward with the show and the amazing guests that we have on. And speaking of amazing, thank you both, Bobbi, Lee. Thank you. This was awesome.
Well, you guys shared so much good insight and just a lot of great content and things for people to think about today.
Thanks. We always appreciate just, any time with you both is just time really well spent. And Skip, next time we get to Florida, we know we're going to Tsunami Sushi.
Sheila and I haven't been there in over a year, so. Yeah, that works.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, it does.
My goodness!
Thanks again. This was really wonderful. It's an honor. It's an honor that you invited us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, it's an honor to have you both. And We want to thank our listeners as well for joining us. Please tell your friends about this podcast, especially if they want to improve their photography business as we move out of this pandemic. We look forward to having you with us next time on Beyond Technique, brought to you by Platypod, Photofocus, and Cohen University.